Chapter 1. Patience frowned down at the display case. She'd made 4 types of scones and 3 different new muffins for the bakery, and she was dying to know if any of them were a hit. She looked over her shoulder at her cousin, Grace. "Is that cake going to take all day? I have someone who wants a birthday cake they can pick up by this afternoon. Will you have time to get to it?" Grace looked up from the wedding cake she was working on. "I can take a break from this for a birthday cake if it's not too elaborate. If there's a lot to be done on it, you may need to have Felicity do it." Felicity made a face. "I hate working on cakes. I like cookies." "I know, but you're good with a frosting bag, and I don't know if I can do this cake as well as a complicated birthday cake. If someone wants another Princess Castle, I definitely won't have time." "Oh, this is a simple one," Patience put in. "It's just a few flowers and a happy birthday message. It'll probably take you 20 minutes. Grace nodded. "I can do that much easily. Piece of cake." She giggled at her own joke. Patience rolled her eyes. "Just don't start on the lawyer jokes, Grace. You promised no lawyer jokes until after the 1st of July. Grace frowned. "Why did I promise that again? I don't even remember." "Doesn't matter. You promised and Felicity and I both witnessed it. But I love telling lawyer jokes." "We know," Patience and Felicity said together. Patience was 2 years older than her sister at 24, and the oldest of the 8 cousins. Grace sighed. "You two take all my fun away." Patience looked over her shoulder at Grace as she counted the change in the cash register in preparation for opening the bakery for the day. "I'm sure you and Marcus have plenty of fun." Grace blushed, staring at the cake and refusing to speak. Felicity rolled her eyes. "Give Grace a break. I'm just glad she's married and happy." "So am I," Patience responded. "Time to open. Are you two ready to act all professional and stuff?" Because of the way the bakery was laid out, the women worked in full view of the customers who patronized the shop. "Ready." Grace still didn't look up from her cake. "Of course," Felicity said, decorating a cookie to look like a minion for the daycare the Culpeppers had at their house. Patience hurried around the counter and unlocked the door, flipping the sign in the window to open. Patience's specialty was pies, but they weren't selling well at this time of year, so she was experimenting with making other things. She hoped the pies started selling better in the fall for the holiday season like she expected. Until then, she'd bake whatever she could that would sell, and hopefully she wouldn't always be relegated to working the cash register while her coworkers got to have all the fun baking. She took her spot behind the counter and made sure the coffee was ready. She heard the tinkle of the bell, indicating they had a customer. They did a brisk breakfast business, which had surprised them all at first, but now they baked muffins, scones, and cinnamon rolls to accommodate the breakfast customers. She smiled at the man who walked in, a little girl with brown hair and beautiful eyes in a ballerina outfit coming along behind him. The girl had a frown on her face. "But, Daddy, if I don't go to my ballet class, how will I ever become a professional ballerina and dance across all the best and biggest stages in the world?" Her father sighed. "I take you to your ballet classes twice a week. I just can't leave work to take you to camp all summer. The other girls will get better than me." The man rubbed the back of his neck as he looked down into the display case. "Do you want a scone or muffins for breakfast?" "I want to go to ballet camp." The little girl folded her arms across her chest belligerently. "Why can't someone else drive me?" Patience felt memories flooding back. She'd wanted so badly to take ballet lessons when she'd been about that little girl's age, but her father had refused. He didn't feel like women should prance around in skin-tight clothes showing off their bodies and trying to tempt men. Even at the age of 6. "I'll take her." The words were out of Patience's mouth before she'd realized she was going to say them. "Oh, you will?" The girl clapped her hands together, a big smile on her face. See, Daddy? This nice lady will take me. It's all settled. The man shook his head. We don't even know her. I appreciate the kind offer, Miss Quinlan. Patience Quinlan. My cousins married the 4 Culpepper brothers. So you know Hope? Hope runs the daycare Corinne starts at today. Patience nodded. Hope is my cousin. I'm staying at Linda Culpepper's house. My business partner is Hope's sister, Grace. She pointed to her cousin. And my sister is also here. That's Felicity. I'm Patience. I promise, I'll take good care of her. You don't understand. It would mean picking her up from daycare at 11:30 every morning and driving her into Culpepper to the dance studio. I could pick her up, but I can't ask anyone to even drive her one way. You're not asking. I'm offering. And I do know exactly what it means. Every day? She asked. Yes, I'd need it done every day, but I really can't ask that. Look, Mr. Bassett. Ryan Bassett. Look, Mr. Bassett, I know exactly what I'm offering to do. I wanted to be a ballerina with everything inside me at her age, and I was never allowed to take one lesson. Let me watch my dreams come true through your little girl. If you don't trust me, ask Hope about me. Ask Linda about me. I'll even give you the name of my pastor back home, and you can write and ask him about me. I don't think asking your old pastor about you would be necessary. Ryan seemed to be arguing with himself internally. Finally, he nodded. I'll ask Hope and Linda about you. May I call in an hour with my answer? Patience nodded, winking at Corinne. She could tell she'd won the battle. That would be fine. Let me give you my cell number. She waited until he had his phone out and rattled off her number. Can she help me find the studio if I can get us into Culpepper? I'm new to town. She can. Ryan frowned. Are you sure? This is a big commitment to make to a child you've never seen before. You won't be missed here in the bakery? Patience turned and looked at her cousin and sister. If I promise to do extra cleanup, will you mind? You don't even have to do extra cleanup, Grace responded automatically. I think it's a great idea. Me too, Felicity said. It's just for the summer. Ryan blinked a couple of times, surprised by the generosity of the 3 women in front of him. Thank you. He looked at Patience. I'll call you in a bit, after I've talked to Hope and Linda. Corinne gave Patience a thumbs up. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Patience smiled as the little girl chose a scone. I made that myself. Will you let me know later if you like it? Scones are new to me. I've never had a scone, but I know I'll like it, 'cause I like you. Does that mean you don't like me? Ryan asked her, as he pointed to the orange muffins. I'll have 2 of those. No, but your cooking is yucky, and she's wearing a big white apron, so she must know what she's doing. Corinne accepted the scone in a small white bag, and Patience handed her 2 napkins. Would you like coffee, Mr. Bassett? Patience asked, hiding a smile at the girl's summation of her father's cooking. Yes, please. He looked around. You should have some tables in here for your breakfast customers. Patience nodded. I agree. We'll have to see about that as soon as we can. She took his money from him and gave him change. Have a good day. She smiled down at Corinne. I will see you later. Thank you. Corinne looked as happy as a clam as she hurried out of the store, doing dancing leaps instead of walking. Ryan slipped behind the steering wheel of his pickup truck as Corinne scrambled into the back seat and climbed into her booster seat, buckling herself in. Are you ready? He asked. All buckled. Corinne told him. Are you going to let that nice lady drive me to camp? Ryan frowned. First, I need to talk to Miss Hope and Mrs. Culpepper. Depending on what they say, I probably will let her drive you. I like her. She'd make a good new mommy. He shook his head. You had a mommy. She died, remember? I remember. That's why I need a new mommy. Then we wouldn't have to worry so much about getting me places. You and my new mommy could take turns. He said nothing else because they'd already reached the big house on the Culpepper ranch. They'd gone to the bakery because it was right there on property, and he hoped the breakfast lived up to the hype. People had been talking about it ever since it opened. Have you got your things? Corinne nodded, grabbing her bag with her scone and her backpack. I have everything. She got down out of the truck and walked around, taking her father's hand. She was a little nervous about starting at the daycare, but she had no choice. There was no school in the summer. Ryan knocked on the door and waited for someone to come and let them in. Linda Culpepper popped her head out. Hi, Ryan. And welcome, Corinne. You're going to love it here. She opened the door wide, and Corinne walked in, carrying her breakfast with her. You can eat that at the table. Do you have a minute? Ryan asked. Linda nodded. Of course. Come in. She was obviously used to nervous parents on their first day dropping their children off. What can I help you with? Well, Corinne wants to do the ballet camp in town. Linda nodded. I've heard a lot about it, but unless you can pick her up and drop her off there, we can't accommodate that. We don't have enough workers to make the drive into town every day. I've been telling her that for months, but she still wants to do it. Patience Quinlan offered to pick her up here and drop her off at the camp, but I don't know her well at all. She said you could vouch for her. Linda smiled and nodded. Absolutely. Patience is a wonderful young woman, and she is very reliable. I would trust my future grandbabies with her. Ryan's eyes widened. That was high praise indeed. Would you allow her to pick Corinne up and drop her off today? Would I need to sign anything? She hurried away and grabbed a manila folder from the counter. I have the forms right here. All you need to do is fill out everyone who is allowed to pick her up. Ryan looked at the form and back at Linda. You're sure? She nodded. I'm positive. She will be as safe as she'd be with you. Ryan took the form and filled it out quickly, putting Patience's name in the spot for people who could pick Corinne up. All right. I'm going to let it happen. He handed her the form and smiled. Thanks. Walking over to Corinne, who was sitting at the table with another little girl and jabbering away, he put his hand on her shoulder. Be good. I'll see you tonight. Bye, Daddy. You be good too. He smiled. She always told him to be good when he told her to be good. She told him being naughty was something grown-ups did too. Walking out to the car, he punched in the number he'd just added and put the phone to his ear. It took 3 rings before she answered. It's Ryan Bassett. Oh, hello, Mr. Bassett. I'm assuming I checked out all right? You did. If you're still willing, Corinne and I would be pleased to accept your offer. I'll be at the big house at 11:30 to take her into town. Do I need to feed her? No, she has a lunch packed in her backpack. She was hoping we'd find a way for her to be able to go, even though I kept telling her it wasn't possible. He shook his head. She's a determined little thing. When something is important, it does a girl good to be determined. I'll take care of her. He smiled. I know you will. Thank you, Patience. He ended the call and put the phone down before he drove out of the Culpeppers' driveway. He had a busy day ahead, and he needed to get a pretty little baker out of his mind and concentrate on his horses. Patience tucked the phone back into her purse, thrilled to be able to help the family out. Corinne was such a sweet little thing, and her father made her heart beat faster. She reminded herself that she didn't even know if the man was single as she served her next customer. She'd find out soon though. Linda would know. Linda knew everything and everyone. Once the bakery was empty of customers, Patience turned around. "I'm going to be gone for about an hour every day." Grace grinned. "I guess everyone said nice things about you." "I guess so." She restocked the bakery case and wiped the fingerprints off it, before making sure the coffee was filled. "That's one cute daddy that little girl has." Grace wiggled her eyebrows at her cousin. "We don't even know if he's a single father," Patience said with a blush. "He had that single father vibe," Grace said. Patience ignored her cousin as she worked. They had another hour before things would start to slow down, and she could get back to baking. She wanted to try a new kind of cheesecake. Something that would have people coming back. Maybe a chocolate s'more cheesecake in individual pie tins. Yes, that's what she'd work on today. Asterisk. Patience stuck her cheesecakes in the oven and reminded her sister to get them out. "Timer will go off in 30, and it's my little cheesecakes. Make sure you get them for me." "I won't forget, and I'll take care of any customers," Felicity told her. "Don't worry. There are 3 of us running this place for a reason." Patience took her purse. "And don't try them without me." She'd tried 3 different combinations for the cheesecakes, and she wanted them all to sample them together. She needed something special she was contributing. They did well on the breakfast pastries, but she wanted something more than that. "I'll be back in about an hour." She grabbed her purse and hurried out the door, getting behind the wheel of the car they'd driven from Kentucky in. It was Honor's officially, but she didn't care if the others drove it. She drove to the big house and hurried inside, realizing she was a minute late. Linda was waiting for her with Corinne. "She's ready." Patience smiled at her hostess, who was also her cousin's mother-in-law. "Thank you for having her waiting for me. I think it's really nice of you to offer to take her to her ballet camp. It's all she's talked about all morning." Linda pointed to the booster seat next to the front door. "Ryan left that for you. He said he had another at home he'd put into his truck, so you keep that one." "Okay, thanks." She carried the booster seat out to the car and put it in the back. Corinne climbed in immediately. When Patience leaned over to buckle her in, Corinne said, "I'm 6, not a baby." "I've got it." Patience hid a grin as she hurried around to the front and slid behind the wheel. "Let's go. I'm going to drive to Culpepper, and you have to show me where to go from there." "I can do that." "Tell me what you like to do," Patience said, wanting to get to know the sweet little girl. "I know you like to dance." "I like dancing best, but I also like to read. And I really like butterflies." "Oh, I noticed your backpack was covered with pink butterflies." "It's very pretty. My tutu is pink too. I don't think any girl should bother with other colors. Boys either for that matter. Pink tutus and pink butterflies make the whole world happier." Patience grinned. "I like that. I think I'll get a pink apron for work." Corinne gasped. "But if you wear a pink apron for work, you won't be as good of a cook." "I won't?" "Oh, no. Only people with white aprons can cook as well as you do." "My scone was delicious." "I'm glad you liked it." Patience made a right turn to head toward town. "What does your daddy do?" "He's a horse trainer," Corinne said, her voice filled with pride. "People bring him their mean horses that they want to be gentle, and he teaches them to be nice." "Do you ride horses?" "Yes, but I'm not horse crazy like some girls I know. I like dancing better." "I can understand that. My cousin is horse crazy." "Do you remember meeting my cousin Grace this morning?" "Yes. Her twin sister is Honor, and she likes horses better than people." A lot better than people. And she always smells like she just rolled around in a barn. Ew. I know. It's yucky. Patience couldn't help but grin at the little girl's response. What does your mommy do? She held her breath while she waited for the answer. My mommy went to heaven before I started kindergarten. She had cancer. I'm so sorry. Me too. It was sad. All her hair fell out, and then she died. I still miss her a lot. I'm sure you do. Did you just finish kindergarten? Or first grade? First grade. Daddy is getting better at taking care of me, but I need a mommy. You do? Patience couldn't help but wonder what the girl's father would say if he could hear his daughter. I do. I need someone who knows how to cook and clean and knows how to fix my hair. Corinne sounded sad. He puts my hair in a ponytail using a vacuum cleaner. It's so silly. Patience had seen videos of fathers doing that to their little girls, and she stifled a laugh. Well, I'll fix your hair anytime you need me to. I'm really good at French braiding hair. I do my sister's all the time. I love French braids. If I come to the bakery early tomorrow, will you do it for me? I will. If it's okay with your daddy. He doesn't care how I wear my hair as long as he doesn't have to fix it, Corinne told her. Patience smiled. I can understand that. It must be tough for him to be the daddy of such a beautiful little ballerina with no help at all. Corinne told her to turn right, so she did, and a moment later, she stopped in front of a small ballet studio. This is the place. Patience walked around the car and took Corinne's hand. When they got inside, a woman in her early 30s smiled at Patience. I don't know you yet. I'm Katie Sanford. Patience Quinlan. Oh, are you one of the Quinlan quads who married the Culpeppers? No, they're my cousins. My sister and I came out with the Quinlan twins to start the bakery. Katie's eyes widened. I've heard amazing things about your bakery. Are you the cake girl? Or the cookie girl? I'm the pie girl who is looking for a summer specialty. How do you feel about cheesecake? A little market survey never hurt anyone. Katie laughed. Anytime you need someone to sample that cheesecake, you just let me know. Oh, I may take you up on that. Patience looked down at Corinne. I'm going to go back to work now. You have a wonderful day and dance until your feet hurt. Corinne threw her arms around Patience and hugged her tight. Thank you so much for bringing me. You made all my dreams come true. Patience smiled, ruffling the girl's hair, and smiling sadly at the ponytail. I'll see you tomorrow morning. She waved to Katie and left, smiling to herself. It had been such a little thing for her to agree to do, but such a big thing for Corinne. She was glad she'd offered, because she knew making a difference in other people's lives was what life was all about. Chapter 2. When Ryan picked Corinne up from her ballet camp that afternoon, she was bubbling over with excitement. I had the best day ever. First I got to meet Miss Patience, and she was so nice to me. And then I got to eat a scone. And then I got to spend the whole morning with other kids doing crafts at Mrs. Culpepper's house. And then Miss Patience drove me to ballet camp. I loved ballet camp. I can do everything we did today already, so I'm one of the more advanced students. Ryan smiled and told her to buckle up as he got behind the wheel. So Miss Patience was nice to you? She was wonderful. She drove me, and she talked to Miss Katie, and she told me if we go to the bakery early, she'll French braid my hair for me. Can we, Daddy? Please? I'm tired of vacuum cleaner ponytails. Ryan frowned. But that's all I know how to do. But Miss Patience doesn't mind. She told me. She's so nice, Daddy. Can we have a picnic with her when you're off work next? I won't be off again until Sunday. So can we have a picnic on Sunday? I want to spend more time with her. She's just as pretty as a mommy. You know she's not your mommy, though, right? Yes, I know, but when she's with me, I can pretend. Ryan wasn't sure how he felt about his little girl wanting another mommy. He still missed his wife a great deal. With the right woman, it might be a good idea, though. He knew Corinne needed a woman's influence. I'll ask her, but she might be busy. Corinne smiled. Thank you, Daddy. You're the best daddy in the whole world, you know. Even though you hate my cooking? You didn't burn the mac and cheese last night, she said encouragingly. He sighed. He needed to find a cooking class. And fast. Call her now. I can't. I'm driving. Call her as soon as we get home then. You have to ask her before she can say yes. He smiled. You are too logical for your own good, pumpkin. I'm not a pumpkin. Pumpkins are orange. I'm pink cotton candy. I'll call her, okay? Thank you, Daddy. Asterisk. Patience and Felicity were locking up the bakery to walk home when Patience's phone rang. Grace had left a bit early to meet Marcus in town for supper. Patience fished the phone out of her purse and was surprised to see it was Ryan calling. Hello? Hi there. This is Ryan. His deep voice boomed over the phone at her, and Patience felt her heart skip a beat. Now that she knew he was single, she couldn't help thinking about how handsome he was. Hi, Ryan. Did Corinne have a good time at ballet camp? She can't quit talking about how wonderful it is and how much fun she had with you. She said that if we come early tomorrow, you're going to French braid her hair. She said she was tired of vacuum cleaner ponytails, so I offered. There was a pause. She told you that's how I ponytail her hair? She did. I hope that's all right. Patience did her best to keep the laughter out of her voice, but it was hard. Too late now if it isn't. Anyway, she asked me to call you and invite you on a picnic with us on Sunday. Oh, sure. The bakery is closed Sundays and Mondays, so I'd be happy to go on a picnic with you. Patience's gaze met her sister's. Felicity was wiggling her eyebrows up and down. Would you like me to prepare lunch? She told you about me burning mac and cheese, didn't she? That time, Patience couldn't control her laugh. No, actually she didn't. Is it really possible to burn mac and cheese? There was more silence. Obviously it is possible, or I wouldn't have done it. I'll get lunch from the grocery store deli. No need for you to cook on your day off. Sounds good. Do you want me to meet you somewhere? Well, how about I pick you up for church at 9, and you go to church with us, and then we go on a picnic after. Patience had yet to go to church in town, because she hated to go to church after the way she'd been raised. She could try it, though. I can do that. What time does church start? It starts at 10, but I try to get there about 9:30. All right. Yeah, I can do that. I'll see you in the morning, then. Good night. As soon as she pushed end, Felicity looked at her. So you're going out with the hot single dad? Really? Patience shrugged. I'm going on a picnic with him and his daughter. It's not like we're going out dancing till dawn. If you want to do that, I'm happy to babysit. I don't think our relationship has progressed to that point. Yet. But you want it to? Patience shrugged, her hand on the front doorknob of the big house. I sure wouldn't complain. He makes my heart beat faster, just by looking at me. Oh, well. Don't let Daddy hear you say that. Linda? She hoped so. I made chicken spaghetti. Linda turned to look at the man in her kitchen. He looked flustered. Do you want to stay and eat with us? He shook his head. No, I should be getting home. It's been a long day. Let me at least send some home with you. If you won't let me pay you for your help, the least I can do is provide your supper. He nodded to that, and Linda quickly scooped some dinner into a disposable plastic container and added some garlic bread. I have an individual cheesecake, Patience said. It's something new I'm trying. I'm not going to turn down a cheesecake, Roy said with a smile. Linda took that and wrapped it up as well, putting all of the individual things into a grocery sack. There you go. Thanks again for your help. Roy nodded, heading for the door. It was nice meeting you, Felicity offered. He nodded, before disappearing. A man of few words, Felicity noted after he'd left. Always has been, Linda said, fixing 3 plates for them. I hope you girls are hungry, because I made a lot. Asterisk. Just before the bakery opened at 7 the following morning, Patience heard a knock at the door. She hurried over, already knowing who their early morning customers would be. She opened the door and relocked it behind them. Good morning. Ryan smiled at her. Good morning. She'd brought a brush, a comb, and a ponytail holder to help her with the braid. Curran's hair was down, and it fell well past her shoulders. There was a single chair in front of the counter, and Patience sat down on it, pulling the little girl between her legs. Felicity, would you help Ryan get what he wants while I work on Curran's hair, please? Absolutely. Felicity hurried over and stood at the counter. Are you excited about your second day at ballet camp? Patience asked. Oh, yes, ma'am. Very excited. I like spending the mornings at Mrs. Culpepper's house, because we always do fun things, but it's so much fun to go to the studio and dance, dance, dance. Patience carefully brushed the knots out of her hair and then went to work, dividing the strands of her hair up for the braid. And you're wearing another pretty pink leotard. And tutu. I have lots of pink dance outfits, Corinne told her proudly. Well, of course you do. You know what else you need? No, what? You need pink butterfly wings to wear with your tutu. Ryan turned from the counter where he'd been choosing the muffins he wanted to start his day with. Don't give her any ideas. She has enough of her own. I think she'd look beautiful with butterfly wings, Patience said with a grin. Ryan sighed. I have a feeling your sister is not going to be a good influence on my daughter, he told Felicity. Felicity shrugged. I think you're very wrong about that. She'll be a wonderful influence. If you say so. I say so, Daddy. I love Patience. Can we keep her? Ryan gulped, closing his eyes. We can't just keep every pretty lady who comes along, Corinne. She's not a puppy. Pretty? Patience couldn't help but grin. Yeah, you can only keep a pretty lady if you ask her nicely. Miss Patience, would you marry my daddy so I can keep you forever? Corinne asked sweetly. You mean like that? Exactly like that. Patience bit her lip to suppress the laugh that wanted to come out. Well? Corinne asked. Well, what? Can we keep you? Patience shook her head. I'm afraid your daddy has to ask me to marry him. It can't be something you and I decide. It has to be something he wants too. But you said if I asked nicely. Patience used the ponytail holder on the end of the braid. You have to ask your daddy nicely to ask me nicely. See how that works? I guess. I still want to keep you, though. Patience hugged Corinne close. I would say yes in a heartbeat if I could. It's just not time. Maybe someday it will be. Patience stood up and walked around the counter. Ryan had already paid for his and Corinne's breakfast and was sipping his coffee. Thanks for letting us come early for the braid, he said, refusing to even discuss the conversation she'd just had with his daughter. He was very impressed with how easily she'd handled the little girl's questions. No problem. I'm happy to do it. He looked at her hair. I was thinking I'd ask you to show me how, but I watched for a second and felt a little nauseated. I could never do that. She laughed. Nauseated? Your fingers moved so fast, it made me dizzy. I'd be happy to show you, but I'm also happy to do it anytime. Curran's a sweetheart. Ryan studied Patience for a moment, a plan forming in his mind. Thanks for helping out once again. Can you still take her to ballet camp later? Of course. We had fun yesterday, didn't we, Corinne? Yes, we did. I'd like to go make sure her booster seat is in the car correctly, if you don't mind. It's strange enough having someone I barely know drive her around, but I do want to make sure she's safe. Ryan held his hand out for her keys. That would be great. Thanks. You're thanking me for helping you help me. I don't think that's necessary. Patience shrugged. I'm a Southern girl, and my mama taught me that manners were never excessive or overdone. Ryan grinned as he hurried out to take care of the extra booster seat, leaving his breakfast on the counter. He liked the idea of her Southern manners rubbing off on his little girl. He was quite impressed with her, whether he wanted to admit it or not. 10 minutes later, he dropped her off and headed back to his ranch to work, determined that he wasn't going to let the pretty lady his daughter had decided to love get away. She would make a perfect new mama for his little girl. Asterisk. Every morning that week, Ryan and Corinne were at the bakery before it opened, and Patience fixed the girl's hair. On Friday when they came in, Patience surprised the little girl with a pair of pink butterfly wings to match her ballerina outfit. Amazon Prime was her friend. Oh, Miss Patience. Those are the most beautiful butterfly wings in the whole wide world. Can you help me put them on? Of course, I can. But let me do your hair first, because the wings will get in the way otherwise. Ryan shook his head at her. Butterfly wings? Really? He wasn't sure if he should be amused or exasperated. Patience obviously loved his little girl, though, and he couldn't be upset about that. Patience just grinned at him. I would have given anything to dress in a pink ballerina outfit and dance to my heart's content at her age, but I was never allowed. I would have loved to wear butterfly wings, but I had to wear dresses that came to mid-calf and long-sleeved shirts. I guess my arms would have sent a man into a fit. He blinked a couple of times. Is that why you were never able to take ballet classes? She nodded. I wanted to, but my father always refused. He said that girls shouldn't show their bodies that way. He shook his head. She's only 6. I was only 6 as well. She shrugged, walking behind the counter to help him buy what he wanted. It sounds like you had an interesting upbringing. We did. All 8 of us Quinlan girls did. Felicity and I had it easier than our cousins, though, because our mother didn't buy into the religious furor that the others did. Daddy would say one thing, but Mama pretty much let us do whatever we wanted after he left for work. She even homeschooled us, because she didn't want us to go to a church-run school that would suppress us and try to force us into our father's belief system. Wow. I'm glad you had her then. Patience nodded. Me too. I never understood how she put up with Daddy, but she said she loved him with everything inside her. His crazy religious beliefs had nothing to do with how she felt. She pretended when he was around. Are we still on for the picnic on Sunday? He suddenly understood why he'd never seen her at church. She obviously no longer had any desire to go. We can pick you up after church. She shook her head. You know, I still have nightmares about stepping foot inside a church, so I'm going to face my fears. If I can do that, I can do anything. You haven't been to church since you moved here, have you? I went to my cousin's wedding, but I haven't been to a regular Sunday service, no. I appreciate you being willing to go with us then. It means a lot to Corinne to be able to show you off to her friends. She's been telling people about you, and how wonderful and pretty you are, all week. Patience smiled. Hopefully I can live up to my new reputation then. He laughed. How could you not? She watched them as they left, smiling after them. She had started to look forward to the 10 minutes they had together every morning. After they were gone, she turned to see her sister and cousin watching her. You really like him, don't you? Felicity asked. Patience shrugged, trying to seem nonchalant about it. He's really nice, and he loves his little girl. How could anyone not like him? Grace shook her head. No, you like him. Like really like him. I have a feeling I know who will be the next Quinlan to marry and stay forever in Culpepper, Wyoming. Patience made a face. I've known him for less than a week. You can't plan my wedding yet. Felicity looked at Grace. She's right. You have to give it a couple more days. Asterisk. Patience couldn't believe how sad she was about not seeing Corinne and Ryan on Saturday morning. She wasn't certain which one she cared about more, but that was probably a good thing. No point in falling for a single father, if you didn't fall for his child as well. She made 3 of her little individual cheesecakes for their dessert on Sunday, thinking she'd finally perfected them. She wanted to start selling them on Tuesday, if all went well. Around lunchtime on Saturday, a couple came into the bakery asking for Grace. She's on break. Can I help you with something? The woman shook her head. No, we really just need to see her for a minute. Tell her Jessie and Valerie are here. She removed her sunglasses, and Patience recognized her. Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Savoy. I'll run and get her. I love your show, but I didn't recognize you with the sunglasses. Valerie smiled. Don't worry about it. Patience hurried to the back and looked at Grace. Jessie and Valerie Savoy are here. Grace grinned, jumping to her feet. Thanks. She hurried to the front with Patience in her wake. She would work on something, but she wanted to at least hear what they had to say to Grace. Hi, Valerie. Grace hurried around the corner and hugged the other woman. Are you guys back for good? Valerie nodded. We're officially moving into the ranch this weekend. She looked around the bakery. I love this little place. I need something with chocolate. Grace thought for a moment. My cousin, Patience, has been experimenting with a couple of S. Morey's cheesecake recipes. Does that sound good? She also has a chocolate silk pie that's to die for. Valerie's eyes widened, and she looked at Jessie, who had an indulgent grin on his face. I'll take one of each. The cheesecakes are tiny. Enough for one person. Oh, I'll need 2 of those then. Valerie looked at Patience. Are you Patience? Patience nodded. I am. It's really good to meet you. I have a feeling we'll be coming here quite a bit. Valerie frowned. You really need tables and chairs though. People should be able to eat in if they want to. We've been talking about that, Grace said. After they were gone, the 3 of them stood for a moment, before they all squealed. Our first celebrities in the bakery. Patience said. I didn't recognize them until Valerie took off her sunglasses. Aren't they sweet? Grace asked. I love them both so much. You can't even tell she's pregnant yet. Felicity smiled. Their wedding was so sweet on the season finale this week. Grace sighed happily. It was. And aren't they just as amazing in person as they are on the show? They stood there with goofy grins on their faces for another minute or 2 before they all got back to work. Fangirling over lazy love doesn't pay the bills, unfortunately, Patience said. If only it did. A few minutes later, when they were all deeply engrossed in their work again, Patience's phone rang. She hurried to pick it up. Hello? Patience, it's Linda. Oh, hey, Linda. Is everything all right? Linda had never called her at the bakery before. Yeah, everything's fine. I just wanted to let you girls know I won't be home for supper tonight, so you're on your own. You won't? No, Roy and I are driving into the city for supper. He wants to take me somewhere nicer than what we have available in Culpepper. We'll be home late. Have a good time. After she'd ended the call, Patience looked at Grace and Felicity. Roy and Linda are going into the city for supper, and they'll be home late. The implication was that we shouldn't wait up. Felicity grinned. Sounds good to me. Patience looked at her sister. How would you feel about me inviting Ryan and Corinne over for supper? Would you mind? Felicity shrugged. I'll feel like a fifth wheel, but other than that, I won't mind at all. Before she lost her nerve, Patience tapped Ryan's number on her phone. She knew he worked on Saturdays, so she wanted to keep the call brief. Linda's going to be out tonight, so I thought I could cook dinner for you and Corinne. Would you like to come? There was a brief pause before Ryan responded. I have a better idea. Could your sister watch Corinne, and the two of us could go to the diner in town? I don't mind cooking for you, Patience told him. I know you don't, but I'd like to take you out. There's a small bar in town with dancing as well. I won't drink, but they usually have a good band. Sounds good. I don't know how to dance, but maybe you could teach me. Let me ask Felicity if she's willing. She muted the phone. Felicity, he wants to take me to supper and dancing in town tonight. Will you watch Corinne? My future niece? I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Of course, I'll watch her. Patience smiled as she unmuted the phone. Felicity said she'd be happy to watch her. I'll pick you up at 7 then. Sounds good to me. Chapter 3. Patience showered as soon as she walked in the door from the bakery, wanting to get every stray bit of flour off of her body before Ryan picked her up for the evening. It felt strange leaving Corinne with her sister, because she cared so much for the little girl already, but she loved the idea of being alone with Ryan as well. At least they'd all be going on a picnic together the next day. If she and Ryan were going to start dating, she wanted to make sure the little girl was included as often as possible. Corinne didn't need to feel like she was unwanted. She stood in her room, wearing just a bathrobe, digging through her closet, frowning. Finally, she called out at the top of her lungs, Felicity. I need you. Felicity came running into the room, opening the door. What's wrong? I don't know what to wear. Patience knew she sounded like a ninny, but she didn't care. Felicity laughed at her. Well, let's see. You're going out dancing. Country music, I'm guessing? Patience shrugged. Probably. She had no idea what kind of music he liked. I have some cowboy boots. No, I have the whole outfit. Wait here. Felicity hurried from the room, seeming more excited than she should be. Patience waited impatiently. She'd never been good at embodying the spurt of her name. When Felicity came back a minute later, she had pink cowboy boots, a denim skirt, and a button-up pink gingham long-sleeved shirt in her hands. I think this will work perfectly. Patience's eyes lit up when she saw what her sister had brought. Yes, that's just right. She hurried into the bathroom with the skirt and blouse, coming out a minute later. She spun to the side and looked at herself in the full-length mirror on one wall. What do you think? I think it fits like it was made for you. Felicity tilted her head to one side, studying her sister. Let's give your hair a little more body. And you need to wear my cowboy boot earrings. Then it'll be perfect. Patience dug through her things and found a heart-shaped locket. Yes, get the earrings. As soon as Felicity came back with them, Patience put them into her ears. Perfect. Now sit down and let me do your hair. I have just how I want you to look. The sisters weren't twins, but they were close enough in size that they'd always shared clothes. I'm so nervous. Felicity laughed. It's your first date. Of course you feel nervous. She bit her lip, looking down at her sister. So who are you going to listen to? Mom or Dad? Patience understood the question perfectly. Their father never would have let her out of the house with a man without a chaperone. Their mother would have said to go and have a wonderful time. Oh, Mama. Definitely. I'm going to go and have a wonderful time. And if he tries to kiss you? Patience shrugged, blushing slightly. She'd never been kissed, never danced with a man, and most certainly never been in a car alone with a man. I don't know. Depends on what my heart tells me. Maybe I'll wait, and maybe I won't. She frowned as his sister pulled her hair a little harder than she meant to. What would you do? Felicity sighed. You know, I don't buy into all their weirdness, but I think waiting for the first kiss is nice. Maybe not waiting until the altar like the church preaches, but waiting until the engagement. Or he's bought me dinner and tries to kiss me maybe. Patience giggled. I'll definitely wait until after dinner. How's that for determination? You have great willpower, my sister. Felicity made one last-minute change. Do you want me to do your makeup? Doesn't it feel like when we were little girls playing dress-up, and Mama would let us try makeup and fun hairstyles as long as Daddy wasn't around? It does. Felicity took that as a yes, and grabbed the makeup bag from her sister's bathroom counter. I think he's a good man. I've asked Linda about him when you weren't around, and she said he's been lost since his wife died. She had breast cancer. I knew she had cancer. Corinne told me. Patience shook her head. I feel bad for him. It's got to be tough for him to be raising a little girl alone. Does that girl ever not wear a tutu? Because if there's a time that happens, I have yet to see it. I really don't know. I haven't known them any longer than you have. The doorbell rang then, and Patience jumped up. Felicity put her hand on her sister's shoulder and pushed her back down on the bed. I'll get the door. You make an entrance. Patience made a face. She had no desire to make an entrance. She waited a minute, checking to make sure she approved of Felicity's job doing her hair and makeup. Sometimes she felt her sister's hand with the makeup brush was a bit too heavy. When she walked out to the entryway, she found Felicity talking to Ryan while Corinne danced around them in a blue tutu. She hurried to the little girl. I thought Corinne was coming tonight. Who are you? The girl giggled. I'm Corinne, silly. Well, you kind of look like Corinne. I mean, you obviously have the vacuumed hair thing going on, but you're wearing blue. My Corinne only wears pink, so you must be a stranger in my house. Sometimes I get sick of pink, so I wear blue. Oh, I see. How many blue tutus do you have? Patience wondered if she should buy a pair of blue butterfly wings. Only one. I never get sick of pink for long. It just lasts for a day, and then I'm back to wearing the color of fairies. That's very wise of you. Patience looked over at Felicity. I bet my sister would be happy to fix your hair in a non-vacuum cleaner style. Felicity nodded, hurrying over beside Patience and Corinne. Oh, I would definitely be happy to do that. I did Patience's hair tonight. I did good, didn't I? Corinne studied Patience and nodded. She looks even prettier than usual, and I didn't think that was possible. Ryan watched the whole thing with a smile. She does look prettier than usual. Do you think I look handsome enough to take her to dinner? Maybe I should go home and change clothes? Corinne looked at her daddy, her head tilted to one side. I think you look good enough, but next time, you should bring her flowers. Pretty girls should get flowers. I'll keep that in mind. His eyes met Patience's. Are you ready? Patience nodded. We won't be too late, she promised her sister with a quick hug, before leaning down to hug Corinne as well. You keep Felicity out of trouble. Sometimes she has a hard time remembering her manners. Corinne nodded seriously. I'll do my very best. Patience walked over to stand beside Ryan, feeling very nervous. She realized she'd never even touched the man before, and now she was going to spend the night dancing in his arms. Hopefully, she wouldn't spend it tripping in his arms. Let's go. Ryan looked down at Corinne. You be good. Corinne rolled her eyes. I'm always good, Daddy. You be good too. Ryan opened the door for her and led her out to his truck. He opened the truck door, trying to remember the manners that had been pounded into him by his mother. Once she had settled herself, he closed the door and walked around, sliding in beside her. After they were both buckled, he rubbed the back of his neck. I'm really rusty in the dating game, so if I mess up, you'll have to forgive me. She smiled. I've never dated to even get the chance to get rusty, so I will have no complaints. I promise. You've never dated? At all? She sighed. Do you remember me saying that my father was very religious? He doesn't think women should date. He believes in courting in full view of a chaperone at all times. Really? So you've never really been out with a man at all? She laughed softly. You are the first man I have ever been alone in a vehicle with. In my entire life. Even my father wouldn't ever take one of us out alone, because he didn't want there to be an appearance of impropriety. That's insane. She shrugged. That's how my life always was before moving here. You have been here, what? A few weeks? Patience nodded. Yup. And my 2 cousins have married since we got here, but they had been set up to marry the men they married long before we left Kentucky. Wow. I've never even heard of that kind of thing. Although where Corinne is concerned, I wouldn't mind adopting those rules. And fitting her with a chastity belt, right before I send her off to the convent. She shook her head, laughing slightly. I promise she wouldn't thank you for it later. I'm sure she wouldn't. He sighed. Raising a daughter alone is hard. I can only imagine. I'm sorry for your loss. He nodded, not sure how else to respond. She was a good woman, and she loved Corinne more than I've ever seen any woman love her child. Corinne misses her still. He stopped at a stop sign and looked over at her in the rapidly fading sunlight. Has she mentioned her? Several times. She talks to me a lot while we drive. I'm sure she does. He smiled sadly. She never seems to stop, does she? No, but that's something I adore about her. And she's so driven. She knows what she wants from life, and she plans on getting it, no matter what it takes. I really appreciate what you've done by helping us out. I never could have made it work otherwise. Corinne said you take mean horses and make them nice for people. Ryan laughed. I guess I do. I'm a horse trainer. Have you always worked with horses? He nodded. Since I was a little boy, I've been horse crazy. I thought about going into rodeo, but I met Brandy, and that thought went right out the window. We were married 2 months later. She wasn't from around here? He shook his head. No, she was a spoiled little rich girl from back east, who had gotten herself into trouble. So after she finished her senior year of high school, her daddy, who knew my father from his college days, sent her out here to apprentice with me. She'd always been a horse lover. It didn't take long for me to know I wanted to keep her forever. So you did? He nodded. I did. Her daddy eventually forgave me for it. He pulled over in front of the diner, hurrying around the truck to open the door for her. He took her hand to help her step onto the curb. I'm sorry Culpepper doesn't have a fancier place for supper. She shrugged. It doesn't matter. I haven't been out to eat in a long time, so I'm just happy to have the opportunity. He opened the door to the diner and waited for her to precede him. The waitress's eyes widened as she saw him with a woman, but she quickly led them to a table. "What are we drinking?" "Just water for me," Patience replied. "I'll have the same." Ryan picked up his menu, though he wasn't sure why. He'd eaten there at least once a week since Brandy died, and he had the whole thing memorized. "I highly recommend the meatloaf. Burgers are good too." Patience frowned. "I think the meatloaf sounds good. I'll have that." She set the menu down, and he put his on top of it. Reaching across the table, he took her hand in his. "Do you mind?" he asked, softly, trying to keep in mind that she'd never really had a man pay attention to her before. She shook her head. "Of course not. If it bothered me that you might touch my hand, I certainly wouldn't have come out with you to begin with." He smiled at that. "You seem like an awfully special woman, and Corinne absolutely adores you. Well, I have a proposition for you. There's not a whole lot for you to get out of it, and there's a lot that would really help me, so I shouldn't be asking, but as far as I can tell, you haven't asked anything." Patience eyed him curiously. "Here's the deal. You are wonderful with my daughter. I haven't seen her bond with anyone the way she is bonding with you since Brandy died. She needs a mother. Desperately. I'm a busy man. I don't have time to put a lot of effort into courting a woman. How would you feel about marrying me, and being Corinne's new mama?" Patience blinked at Ryan a few times. As proposals went, it was downright insulting. There was nothing said about feelings for her, only about his daughter needing a new mother. "And where would you figure into things?" "What do you mean?" he asked, confused. "You're talking about Corinne needing a mama. What about you? Are you in the market for a new wife? Or would we be roommates sharing parenting responsibilities?" He looked into her eyes, realizing he'd made a mess of things, as usual. "I'm sorry. Let's face it. I'm just a country boy who doesn't have a romantic or poetic bone in his entire body. I'm looking for a mother for my daughter and a wife. I'm not going to offer speeches filled with love and happily ever after, because I don't know if I'll ever fall in love with you. I just met you 4 days ago. The only thing I can offer is a little girl who would adore calling you mama. So you won't expect me to share a bed with you?" Patience asked bluntly, surprised she was even able to choke the words out. He swallowed hard, rubbing his thumb back and forth across the palm of her hand. "I'd like you to share my bed very much. But I'd marry you either way. I'll marry you with the agreement that we can slowly get to know each other, and you can share my bed whenever you feel ready. Or I'll marry you and make love with you the first night. I prefer not waiting, but I can understand how you'd feel going to bed with a virtual stranger." The waitress came by then, setting their drinks on the table beside them. "What's it going to be?" the waitress asked, pulling her pencil from behind her right ear. After they'd ordered, he looked back at her. "I know I'm not saying things very well, or at all romantically, but I do think you'll make a good wife. More importantly, I think you'll make a great mother. That's what really matters to me." Patience studied him for a moment. All 6 of her cousins had found love with men there in Culpepper. They were all content with their marriages, and 2 were pregnant. 3 if you counted Hope, who hadn't announced anything yet, but seemed to be tossing her cookies every morning. She finally nodded. "Yeah, I'll marry you." He closed his eyes, exhaling sharply. "I was afraid you'd refuse, because of how badly I blew that." "Your words weren't exactly my dream wedding proposal," she admitted softly, "but I understand perfectly. I appreciate your honesty. You could have said you can't imagine living without me. Instead, you gave me the logical reason we should marry. Logic isn't exactly romantic." She shrugged at that. "Nope. It's not. I'll live through it. Let me try again." Patience blinked at him. You want to propose to me again? Ryan nodded. A real marriage proposal. With Corinne there. Is that all right? She nodded. Yes, that's all right. Why? Because you deserve more than some man you've never gone out with hemming and hawing as he tells you what a good mother you'll be for his little girl. He brought her hand to his lips. I can do better. She smiled at that. All right. I'll let you show me. And what about the wedding night? She blushed. I don't know yet. Can I think about it? He nodded. Absolutely. She changed the subject then, not wanting to discuss anything further until Corinne was involved. The little girl had brought them together, so she had every right to help plan the wedding. What do you like to do in your spare time? He shrugged. A single father who's running his own business doesn't exactly have any spare time. I work, and I take care of my daughter. If I find myself with a spare moment, I usually take a quick nap so I can keep going. What about you? She shrugged. I watch the television show Lazy Love. My cousin has watched all of the episodes at least 30 times, and I'm not as hooked on it as she is, but I like it. A lot. She looked down at their hands that were still joined. I like to read. She leaned forward and whispered. I read romance novels. My mama has been sneaking them to me for years. Sneaking them to you? She nodded. Daddy thinks that novels are from the devil. We can read, but only if it's non-fiction and scripturally based. I think romance novels make women aware that it's okay to have real feelings. Real feelings like sexually? He asked, one eyebrow raised. She shrugged. Our preacher preaches that it's a sin for women to feel pleasure in the marriage bed. Romance novels, and my wonderful mother, kept me from believing that hogwash. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one of my cousins believed it though. Not Chastity, of course, but one of them. That's sad. I don't believe that, just so you know. I believe a woman should get just as much pleasure from sex as a man should. I'm looking forward to showing you what I mean. He winked at her, enjoying her blush. The food was placed before them, and they were quieter for a moment while they ate. When they were finished, he looked at her. Do you want dessert? Or straight to dancing? No dessert. I prefer to eat my own treats. Treats. I like that term for what you make. I guess it's dancing, but I've never danced before. I'm afraid I'll make a fool out of both of us. He thought about that for a moment. Well, I can't be married to a woman who can't dance, but you don't need to be embarrassed by learning in public. I have an idea. You trust me? She nodded warily. Did she trust him? She'd known him for 4 days, but if she was going to marry him, she'd better trust him. Once they were in the truck, he said, I'm going to take you somewhere that I would like for you to see. It's too late for you to see much, of course, but it's the perfect place to teach you to dance. Okay, she had no idea what he was talking about, but she wasn't going to argue with him. He knew the area so much better than she did, and he knew what he wanted from the night. Let's go then. Chapter 4. He drove straight out of town, toward the mountains towering over them from the west. She'd seen the mountains several times, and desperately wanted to explore them, but their short time in Wyoming had been spent getting the bakery up and running. Saving the Culpepper ranch had been foremost on everyone's minds. Now that the risk of losing it was over, it seemed strange for her to have some spare time to do what she wanted to do. He drove for about 20 minutes, before finally pulling over at a small park. He put his truck in park and then fiddled with the radio for a minute. A loud George Strait song filled the truck. He got out and came around helping her down. What are we doing here? She asked. I'm teaching you to dance. He rolled both windows down with a tap of his finger and closed her door. Now, you put this hand on my shoulder, and I'll hold this hand." Once she was standing how he wanted her, he gently began swaying to the music. She had never been held so close, and it made her feel itchy. Itchy to get closer to him, and there were little tingles flying up her spine. She liked being held like this. Maybe too much. There was no moon that night, but the stars were bright, and she looked into his brown eyes as they moved to the music. "I think I could get used to this." He smiled. "Dancing? Or being held?" "Both. I kind of like being this close to you." "How do you think you'd feel about being kissed by me?" "I will keep my hands where they are." One of his hands was on her waist, and the other was holding her hand. I think that would be all right." Slowly he lowered his head, half expecting her to jump away from him skittishly, but instead, her eyes remained steady on his, until just before his lips touched hers, and her lashes flitted downward. Gently he pressed his lips to hers, brushing softly. He didn't deepen the kiss in any way, instead just enjoying the feel of her lips pressed to his. He wanted to use the hand against her waist to pull her against him, but he refrained, not wanting to scare her with this first kiss. Patience felt like everything inside her body had been dormant until the instant his lips touched hers, and then it was as if she was finally alive. Every nerve ending in her body stood up and cheered when he kissed her, and she liked it. Oh, how she liked it! He was sweet and gentle, just like her mama had said a real gentleman would be. She was glad she'd had her mother's words to tell her what it could be, because she'd think she was doing something sinful otherwise. When he pulled away from her, she wanted to cry out in protest. She wanted to go on kissing him forever, but she knew that wasn't practical. It wasn't something she should do. She wasn't married to him yet. Oh, but when she was going to enjoy being married. She knew it already. "Okay?" he asked. She nodded, moving a half step closer to him, so she could lean her head forward against his shoulder. "I think I like dancing." "And kissing?" She chuckled. "Oh, there's no doubt I like kissing. I could do that all night and not get tired of it, so that's why we probably shouldn't." "Probably not," he agreed. "I sure wouldn't mind, though." She smiled at that, pulling her head back to look up at him. "You're something else, Ryan Bassett. I think my life changed forever the day you brought a pretty little pink ballerina into my bakery." "I hope so. 'Cause I think forever is about how long Corinne and I are going to need you in our lives." They got back into the truck after a little while, and turned the music down, but continued to sit there, holding hands and talking. They talked about all the normal first date stuff, learning one another, while they discussed their possible future together. It was an odd night, but a very good one. Patience knew she'd found the man God had meant for her to marry. She also knew that she didn't need to wait for a wedding night. Even if he wasn't in love with her yet, she was in love with him. She would marry him quickly, so Corinne could have a mother, but she would have married him regardless. Ryan Bassett was her other half. Whether she'd known him 10 years or 4 days. Asterisk. Patience tried to stay calm as she got ready for church the following morning. She hadn't been since leaving Kentucky for good reasons, and she wasn't sure how she would feel about going. She wouldn't let Ryan and Corinne down, though. She packed a bag with a pair of shorts and a t-shirt in it, knowing she would want to be comfortable for their picnic, and she put 3 of her individual S. Morey's cheesecakes into a small cooler. When the doorbell rang, she hurried to the door, wearing a pair of heels that still left her feeling dwarfed beside him. She felt cursed by the Quinlan short jean every time she stood beside him. Corinne was waving to her from the truck. She wished he'd kiss her good morning, but she knew it wouldn't happen with Corinne watching, and she knew it shouldn't. He'd only kissed her the one time, though she wished it was different. She got into the front seat with him, turning around to say good morning to the little girl, and handed her the cooler and the bag with her clothes for later. "You look very pretty this morning," Patience told Corinne. Corinne smiled. Daddy said as long as I didn't wear my ballet outfit to church, I could wear my butterfly wings for the service. So I compromised. I think that was very smart of you, Patience told the girl with a grin. And you look lovely in that pretty blue dress. Corinne smoothed her dress down with a smile. I know. Patience suppressed a laugh as she met Ryan's eyes. She must have gotten her humility from you. Hey. What did I do to deserve that? She shrugged. Not sure, but it worked for me. He pulled out onto the highway and headed toward Culpepper. You're going to love Brother Anthony. Brother Anthony is your pastor? He married all of my cousins. He's amazing. He is, isn't he? Corinne had to put her 2 cents worth in. I like Brother Anthony. He says silly things and makes everyone laugh. Is he as inept at preaching as he is at performing weddings? Patience asked, excited to be part of the service that morning, now that she knew who the preacher was. There was no way his church or sermons would be anything like what she'd been accustomed to back home. Oh, Brother Anthony is good at loving people, and that's about it. What more does a preacher really need to be good at? My preacher back home could preach fire and brimstone with the best of them. He could tell you everything you do wrong, but he didn't have one little drop of love in his heart. I think I'll take Brother Anthony any day. When they got to the church, Corinne insisted on walking between them, holding Patience's hand with one hand, and Ryan's with the other. I feel like I have a whole family again, she announced as they walked toward the church from the parking lot. If Patience had been unsure about her decision to marry Ryan before that, she wasn't now. She met Ryan's gaze over Corinne's head and nodded, hoping he'd know what she meant. His nod made her smile. As soon as they stepped into the church, Grace came rushing over and hugged her. You're going to love this church, she whispered. People here seem to know what love really is. Grace and her family had gone to the same church as Patience, so she felt better hearing her cousin's words. I hope so. She clung to Corinne's hand, nervous about being the center of attention. Marcus, Grace's husband, walked over and smiled at her. Welcome. We're really glad to have another one of the Quinlans here in church. His eyes met hers, telling her he knew as much about her upbringing as Grace had been able to tell him. Have you met Brother Anthony yet? You know he's my grandfather, right? Patience shook her head. I haven't formally met him, and I think I knew that once, but I'd forgotten. He seems like a good man. Marcus nodded. He's wonderful. He looked at Ryan and shook hands with him. How are things going for you? Ryan smiled. I think much better than they'd been for a long time. Marcus didn't seem to need any kind of explanation. It's good to see you not looking quite so alone. Brother Anthony moved up to the pulpit, so they hurried to find seats. Corinne insisted on sitting between Ryan and Patience, obviously happy to have people she loved surrounding her. When Patience realized the sermon was about showing love to others, she exhaled softly, content. She'd never heard such a well-meaning sermon back home, where it had all seemed to be about how it was a Christian's responsibility to change everyone around them. After the sermon, Corinne hurried off to find a friend or two, and brought them back to meet Patience, who was talking to Brother Anthony and his wife, Lovey. She immediately turned her attention to the little girl and her friends. It's so nice to meet you. Are you the lady who keeps driving Corinne to ballet camp? One of the little girls asked. Patience nodded. I like to drive her there. Do you like ballet camp? The girl nodded. I'm not as good as Corinne though. No one's as good as Corinne except Miss Katie. Really? Patience smiled at Corinne. She does seem like a fabulous ballerina. I love her new butterfly wings. They look great with her tutu. I think so too. After a few minutes of talking with the children, Ryan put his hand on her arm. She stood up straight and looked at him. Brother Anthony said he's willing to help us any time we want. even with just a couple of hours' notice. Patience nodded, indicating she knew what he meant. We really appreciate that, Brother Anthony. Oh, it's my pleasure, isn't it, Lovey? Sure it is. Lovey smiled warmly at Patience. Welcome to Culpepper. I hope you find it to be everything you want in life. So far, it seems pretty wonderful to me, Patience said with a smile. We'd better get going on our picnic, then. Ryan looked down at Corinne, who was still talking to her friends. Corinne, it's time to go. We're having a picnic, remember? Corinne smiled happily. I can't wait. Once they were in the truck, Patience asked, are there going to be restroom facilities near our picnic spot? I'd like to change into shorts and a t-shirt. We're going to our house. You can use the bathroom there. We're going on a picnic at your house? He nodded. We have a huge yard, and I want you to see the house. 2 birds with 1 stone and all that. All right. I want you to see my room, Patience. It's pink and ballerina Y. Corinne sounded excited. Of course, it is. I can't wait. He pulled into the driveway of a large ranch house. It wasn't as big as the Culpeppers' main house, but it was a good size for a small family. As soon as they stopped, she unbuckled, and he walked around to open the door for her. I'm taking Patience up to my room first, Daddy, Corinne said as soon as her feet touched the ground. She took Patience's hand and started tugging her toward the house. Ryan stood for a minute watching them disappear into his house. He hadn't had time to clean it, so he hoped she didn't freak out. He didn't know how she felt about a spotless house, but his house was far from perfect. Patience smiled as the door to Corinne's room was opened. She looked around and nodded appreciatively. This room is perfect for my little pink ballerina princess. Corinne giggled. I am a pink ballerina princess. I know you are. I've never met anyone quite like you, Corinne. She spotted the girl's name on the wall, spelled out in pink wooden letters. Did your mama do this? Corinne nodded. She did. I started taking dance lessons when I was 3, so she redid my whole room. Isn't it beautiful? It's absolutely wonderful. There was a picture of the little girl with a woman with long dark hair and brown eyes on the dresser. Is that your mama? Yes. Wasn't she beautiful? She really was. Patience smiled at the mess on the floor of the room. There were leotards and tutus everywhere. Sunday must be laundry day. She felt rather than heard Ryan come into the room behind her. Corinne, I asked you to pick up your room before Patience came over. Why? Are you trying to hide who we really are, Daddy? 'Cause we're really people who throw their clothes on the floor. Patience bit her lip. You want to know a secret? Corinne looked up at her and nodded very seriously. I throw my clothes on the floor sometimes too. Corinne threw her arms around Patience and hugged her, burying her face against her. I love you, Patience. Patience felt tears sting her eyes as she looked over at Ryan. I love you too, Sugardoodle. Sugardoodle? Corinne asked with a giggle. Just seems to fit you. Ryan held up the bag with Patience's clothes in it. I brought this for you. Oh, wonderful. Patience took it from him. Where can I change? He led her out into the hall and to a small bathroom, which had even more clothes on the floor, and globs of toothpaste in the sink. I'm really sorry I didn't have time to clean. Patience shook her head. Don't worry about it. I know how busy your life is right now. She closed the door and quickly changed, pulling on a pair of knee-length shorts and a pink t-shirt. She'd never been allowed to wear shorts, even long shorts, so she felt as if she looked slightly scandalous. When she left the bathroom, she was greeted by Corinne, who had changed into a leotard and tutu. Daddy's getting the picnic ready. Let's go help him. As they walked down the stairs and through the house, Patience looked around her. It seemed like a nice house, but it was definitely in need of a good thorough cleaning. She didn't mind. She'd never expected a widower with a young daughter to do any differently. It would have been astonishing if he had. Ryan was putting the chicken he'd picked up in the grocery store deli out on a plate in the middle of a big quilt he'd spread out on the ground in the backyard. When he saw Patience and Corinne approaching, he called out, just in time. "Now I won't have to eat alone." "You wouldn't have eaten without us, Daddy." "Don't be so sure. I snuck a peek at the treats Patience brought us, and I'm not sure I want to share." "You have to share. Patience will get mad and think you're a bad person if you don't." He sighed. "Fine. I'll share. I don't want to, but I will." Patience grinned at him as she sank down onto the quilt. Once they'd all filled their plates, Corinne took a big bite of her chicken. "I'm glad we decided to have a picnic today," she told them. "You are?" Patience asked. "Why's that?" "Because I love picnics. And because I want you guys to get to know each other better." Ryan looked down at his daughter with one eyebrow raised. "And why is that?" "Because she'd make a good mama. But you won't know that unless you spend some time with her. Can I tell you a secret, Pumpkin?" "What?" "I already know she'd be a good mama." "You do?" Corinne's eyes were wide. "I do. And do you know what?" "What?" "I think we should ask her to marry us together." "Do you know how to do that?" Corinne shook her head, her eyes wide with wonder. "No, how?" "Well, to propose to someone, you have to get down on one knee." Corinne knelt on one knee on the blanket. "Like this?" He nodded. "Here, I'll do it too." He followed suit, so both of them were in front of her, on one knee. Then, we say, "Will you marry me?" together. "Can we do that?" When Corinne nodded, he said, "Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 6, 47, 3. On cue, the two of them asked Patience to marry them. Even though she'd known it was coming, Patience felt tears prick her eyes. "I will." "When?" Corinne asked after flying at Patience for a big hug. Patience's eyes met Ryan's. "I don't know." "What do you think?" "Now." "Now?" "But I don't have a wedding dress right now." "Wear your church dress. We can have the wedding right here. I'll be the flower girl." Patience took deep breaths for a moment. She was all for marrying, but now? Really? "I don't know about right now, sweetheart. There's so much to plan for a wedding." Ryan frowned at Corinne. "I forgot the salt and pepper. Would you run inside and get them for me, baby?" Corinne jumped up and did as she was told, hurrying into the house. "Do you really want a big wedding?" She shook her head. "Not at all. I don't know about right now." "How about this evening? You can get a dress you want to wear. I'm sure your sister or one of your cousins would have one. I'll call Brother Anthony, and we can all meet at the church at say 7? She carefully breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth. "I don't know." "That's really fast." "It is. But I don't see a need to delay. I mean, Corinne is all for it. I love the idea. It's not like you have a house to sell or anything. Where you're living is just temporary." "Why not?" I have no idea why not." "Sure. I've always been overly cautious, but I'm going to just go with it. I love Corinne. And I care about you." She couldn't tell him she loved him yet. Soon, she knew she would though. "I'll make some quick phone calls." "You're allowed to finish eating first," he said with a laugh. "My stomach is doing flip-flops now. I can't." She got up and walked over to lean against the house, punching in Felicity's number. After her sister answered, she said, "Hey you." "Hey. I thought you were out with Ryan and Corinne." "I am. But, I need a favor." "What?" Felicity sounded wary. "I need you to borrow a wedding dress for me, and get yourself a bridesmaid dress. Can you make the phone calls? I'll be home in a couple of hours, but we'll want the whole clan at the church in town at 7. 7. Tonight?" Felicity's voice was barely a squeak. "You plan everything out for months." "Not this time. I'm getting married tonight. Are you in? Wedding dress for you and bridesmaid dress for me. Everyone at the church at 7. I'll have Grace start on a cake." "I don't need the cake. Just you." "We'll need flowers." Felicity sighed. "I'll pick flowers. Better yet, I'll have Chastity and Chris pick flowers. That way we don't have to listen to Chastity talk about sex." "Perfect." Patience closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of all she'd just asked her sister to do. "I wouldn't trade you for anything, you know." "I know. Love you." Felicity ended the call before Patience could respond. Patience walked back to the quilt and took a bite of potato salad. It tasted like sawdust, but she really didn't want to pass out at her own wedding. "Did you call Brother Anthony?" Ryan nodded. "He said he'd been expecting my call, because you Quinlan girls can't seem to go more than 3 days after meeting a man without getting married." Patience laughed. "Now that's not true. I don't think any of us have gotten married within 3 days. Oh wait. Hope did. Okay, maybe he has a point." Corinne ran back then, giving Ryan the salt and pepper. "What did you decide while I was gone?" she asked, looking back and forth between Ryan and Patience. "You knew why he sent you away all along, didn't you?" Corinne nodded. "I may be 6, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid." "No, it certainly doesn't." Ryan grinned at his daughter. "We're not going to get married right now. We're going to wait until about 7 tonight. Do you have a dress to wear to be flower girl?" "I think so. I could be a ballerina butterfly flower girl." Corinne looked at Patience, as if she expected her to say no. What kind of wedding would it be without a ballerina butterfly flower girl? "Of course you can." Patience vowed to herself then to never suppress the girl's personality. If she thought she wanted to be a ballerina butterfly for the wedding, then that's what she'd be. Ryan let out a groan. "Even I would have said no to that one." Patience shrugged, looking at Ryan. "I don't know why. She only gets a new stepmom once in her whole life. She might as well enjoy the experience." Ryan held his hands up in defeat. "Fine. A ballerina butterfly flower girl is just what I wanted." Corinne looked at her father and nodded regally. "You have very good taste. I'll take you home right after lunch so you can get ready." Patience's phone rang, and she fished it out of her pocket. She saw it was Felicity. "Yeah? Everything's in place. Leave Corinne with me tonight. You need at least one night alone." At the thought of the wedding night, Patience's stomach did a flip. "All right." She pushed end and looked at Ryan. "Felicity wants to have an overnight with her new niece tonight. Would that be all right?" Ryan nodded, understanding exactly what that meant. He'd be getting a real wedding night after all. "I'm all for it. I'm taking Corinne to get ready for the wedding at Linda's. She needs her hair done perfectly to match her ballerina butterfly flower girl look. It's a tricky look that will take a while to perfect." Patience really wanted Corinne to have more time with the Quinlan women before she was left overnight. Corinne squealed. "I get to spend time with Patience and my new aunt, Felicity." "Your new aunt? You know she's going to be your aunt?" Oh, she told me she'd be my auntie very soon last night. I'm supposed to call her Aunt Felicity from now on. Patience laughed. Of course you are. I should have known. Her eyes met Ryan's, and he grinned at her, shaking his head. Chapter 5. When Patience and Corinne were dropped off at Linda's, the whole gang was already there. The men had made themselves scarce, as they did during wedding preparations, but the women were ready. Hope, Honor, and Joy absconded with Corinne, promising to make her the most beautiful butterfly ballerina flower girl in the entire history of weddings. Felicity, Grace, Chastity, and Faith crowded around Patience to get her ready, while Linda oversaw the entire lot of them, going back and forth between rooms to help everyone with whatever they needed. Faith smiled at Patience. So did Aunt Rosemary talk to you about the wedding night, or do you need to choose one of us to have that discussion with? Me. Me. Chastity raised her hand, acting like a silly student in a ridiculous sitcom. Patience refused to meet anyone's eyes, not wanting to really talk about the subject. I have a feeling Mama told us a great deal more than you guys heard from yours. Grace frowned. She didn't tell you it's a sin to enjoy it, did she? Patience shook her head vehemently. She told us God gave us those feelings for a reason. Good enough for me, Grace told her, holding up the wedding gown several of them had worn. Will this work? Patience looked at it and nodded. All of the cousins were remarkably similar in size. I think so. Let me try it on. Hope can take it in really quick if she needs to. Felicity smiled at Patience. Or I have a pretty white dress that you can wear. It's not as formal, but considering your flower girl is a ballerina butterfly. Patience grinned. Yeah, I don't think formality is going to happen. I picked some roses, Chastity told her. And Chris carefully cut the thorns off the stems. I wanted you to have pink and white roses to match your little ballerina. Patience felt a tear escape at that. I don't think you guys have any idea what it means to her to be included as she has been. You're all amazing cousins, and sister, she added as she looked at Felicity. She's such a sweet little girl. We're thrilled to have her. She should have a name like Destiny, though. The girls all laughed. I hope none of us is silly enough to try to carry that tradition on, Honor said from the doorway. I brought a ballerina butterfly with me. She wanted to make sure her new mama approved of her hair. Honor stepped out of the way to reveal Corinne, who was dressed in her ballet shoes, leotard, tights, tutu, butterfly wings, and had her hair in a formal updo. Patience took one look at her and spread her arms wide. You look absolutely amazing. Just remember, no dancing down the aisle or your hair will fall down. Corinne wrinkled her nose. Maybe we should French braid it then. Patience laughed. No, I think you should walk slowly down the aisle, just this once. But when will I ever get to be a flower girl again? Well, when your favorite new Auntie Felicity gets married, of course. Felicity announced. Corinne's face lit up. Oh. That will be lovely. She hurried out of the room while Patience went into the bathroom to try on the wedding dress. She came out to show the others, and they all nodded. Looks beautiful on you. Grace walked over and handed her the bouquet of flowers Chastity and Chris had seen too. Yup, I think that's just right. Patience smiled. It's a good thing Ryan hasn't attended any of the Quinlan weddings. He won't be disappointed that he's seen the dress before. Like he could be disappointed when he sees you like that. You don't know men at all, do you? Chastity shook her head. You, my dear cousin, look like a sex goddess about to walk straight into his arms. If he complains, his manhood should be cut off and fed to rabid dogs. Chastity? Patience asked. Yeah? You really scare me sometimes. Chastity just grinned. Patience turned to Felicity. What are you wearing? Grace clapped her hands together. I brought over this adorable pink dress. Comes just past the knee. I've never even worn it. But does the pink match my little ballerina butterfly? Perfectly, Felicity told her. I'm going to go get dressed, and then we'll play the hair and makeup game. Faith put her hand on Patience's shoulder, pushing her down into a chair. I'm doing your hair. So sit there and behave. Grace excused herself to decorate the wedding cake, while the others continued to primp and laugh with each other. The next 2 hours were spent being pampered in a way that was unrivaled for Patience. Chastity painted her toenails while Faith did her hair. Felicity came back dressed and looking adorable, and she was forced into a chair as well. When they were ready, the cousins left the room, leaving the two sisters with a moment alone. I feel a rousing rendition of Get Me to the Church on Time coming on, but I don't want to spoil the moment, Patience said with a grin. How could a show tune ever spoil anything? Felicity returned. Oh, I know. We'll wait until Honor and Grace have to hear us so we can drive them crazy by singing it. Felicity giggled. It sure did stop their fighting on the way here, didn't it? They became quickly united in their hatred of us and our show tunes. Patience giggled, sounding amazingly like her sister. I wonder what they'd say if they knew we'd planned the whole thing to annoy them. Oh, I'm sure they'd kill us both. Felicity's smile slowly faded as she grasped her sister by the hands, taking a step back. You make a beautiful bride. Patience sniffed, determined not to cry and smudge her makeup. Thank you. I wish I could say I wasn't nervous, but that would totally be a lie. Felicity smiled. He cares for you. Anyone can see that. Patience shrugged. The marriage is more for Corinne than anything else, but I think he will come to care for me. And how do you feel for him? I love him. I wouldn't be willing to marry him otherwise. Felicity hugged her sister tight. That's what I thought. You know me better than anyone. Patience sighed. I wish Mama were here. Not Daddy? Felicity asked with a grin, knowing what the answer would be. Can you imagine his reaction to me marrying a man he hasn't personally approved? Or seeing me in this dress? It fits and isn't 6 sizes too big. Daddy hated when we wore clothes that actually fit. It doesn't matter what he thinks anymore, Patience. Only what you and Ryan think. You two will be perfect together. I hope so. I think he still loves his late wife, but maybe he can come to love me too. Felicity squeezed Patience's arm. Just remember, if you try to fight a ghost, you're only shadowboxing. You have to work with the ghost for everyone to be happy. How'd you get so smart? I've always been this smart. You just usually ignored it. Patience laughed, opening the door to go into the hallway. I'm glad you're my maid of honor. And you know you'll be mine. Felicity shook her head. Can you imagine trying to figure out who would be our maid of honor with 5 sisters? I don't envy our cousins that. Me neither. Patience stepped into the living room, and every eye in the room turned toward her. You look beautiful, Carlin told her. Patience had spent little time with the man who considered himself the head of the Culpepper family, but she was happy to have the praise all the same. I just hope Ryan thinks so. Chris smiled at her. Don't worry, I know Ryan well. He was in the same grade as Marcus and me at school. He will think so. How can you be so certain? He's never been stupid, Chris answered simply. Marcus nodded emphatically beside him. Patience took a deep breath. Thank you. All of you. She looked at the clock on the wall, before holding her hand out to Corinne. I think it's time to get this show on the road. Who's going to drive me and my butterfly ballerina to the church? I am. Felicity told her, linking her arm with Patience's. It'll be our last few minutes together as single sisters. We're going to have to start looking for a man for you, Felicity. Felicity shook her head. I'm not ready for that yet. Besides, if there's another Quinlan wedding this summer, poor Linda won't have a single rose left in her garden. They all laughed before going outside and piling into several cars to make their way to the church in town. Patience closed her eyes, concentrating on her breathing as they drove. She couldn't believe how nervous she was, but it wasn't about the wedding night. No, she was looking forward to that. It was the idea of tying herself to a man who didn't love her. How would she make it through a marriage where she was the only one who loved? Miss Patience? Corinne asked from the back seat. Patience turned and gave her attention to her future stepdaughter. Yes, Corinne? When you're married to my daddy, can I start calling you Mama? Please? And that's how she'd make it through. The little girl's words told her she was doing the right thing for 3 different people. Absolutely. I can't think of anything I'd like better. Corinne smiled. I'm so glad we're going to be a family. Me too. Asterisk. Ryan paced the back of the church. It was 10 minutes before the wedding was supposed to start, and he was there alone with Brother Anthony and Lovey. What if Patience had changed her mind? What if she'd decided to run away to Mexico with his daughter? What if? He shook his head. No, she was coming, and so was Corinne. Brother Anthony called him from the front of the church. Come on up here, Ryan. You're going to wear a hole in the rug back there, and the congregation is not going to be happy with you when they have to renovate the church again. Ryan walked to the front to stand beside Brother Anthony. Sorry. I guess I'm just nervous. As any normal red-blooded man would be on his wedding day. Tell me, what is your bride's name again? I've forgotten the name of every one of her cousins during the ceremony, and I'm not going to let that happen this time. She is not going to become pretty blonde girl in the middle of the ceremony. I hope not. She has red hair. Ryan winked at Lovey over Brother Anthony's shoulder. Her name is Patience. And I'm out of it. Out of what, dear? Lovey asked. Patience. I'm out of patience. They should have been here by now. He looked at his watch for the 20th time in 5 minutes. He heard the door of the church open then, as if on cue, and the whole mess of Quinlan ladies hurried in with their men. They filed in, taking their seats toward the front. Ryan took a deep breath and stood at attention next to the pastor, Marcus, Grace's husband, coming to stand beside him as his best man. What are you doing? He hissed. I forgot to ask you to be my best man, so I'm making up for it by being your best man without being asked. Ryan thought about that nonsense for less than a second before his head started hurting. Whatever. Lovey started pounding on the piano in her own inimitable way then, and he watched as Felicity Quinlan walked down the aisle toward him. She was pretty enough, but the person he really wanted to see was his beautiful bride. When Corinne started dancing down the aisle toward him, doing plies, ballet leaps, and twirling the whole while, he forgot to be nervous and just grinned. He had a strong feeling Patience had either not thought to tell his daughter to walk down the aisle, or Corinne had ignored the order. Either way, it made his heart happy to see her dance toward him, the only flowers that came out of her basket flying out as a result of her dancing. When she reached the front, Hope reached out and caught her hand, pulling her down into the pew next to her. Corinne looked so proud of herself as she sat there with her empty basket in her hands. She waved at Ryan, just a little wave, but enough to remind him he was doing the right thing. For all of them. Then his eyes went to the back of the church again, and he watched Patience walk toward him, her eyes locked on his. Her red hair was down around her shoulders, and she seemed to just glow. She walked straight to him and reached for his hand. Ryan pulled her closer and held her hand tightly as they turned their attention to Brother Anthony. My people. We are here to gather. No, that's not right. Let me start over. Brother Anthony cleared his throat loudly and started again. My people. We are gathered here together to join in the bond of holy matrimony this here man, Ryan, who I've known since he was just a little tyke, with his beautiful bride who is not a blonde. Lovey shook her head and hissed loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Patience. Stop telling me to have patience, Lovey. I've been patient every day of my dad-blurned life." Brother Anthony shook his head at his wife. "The bride's name is Patience," Lovey explained. "Oh. Patience." Brother Anthony blushed bright red and continued on with the ceremony as if nothing had happened. "Do you, Patience, take Ryan here to be your husband? To love, honor, and respect him till one of you dies?" "I do." Patience sneaked a glance at Ryan's face and saw that he was doing his best not to laugh. "Do you, Ryan, take the pretty little redhead beside you to be your lawfully wedded wife? To love, honor, wait, Lovey. Wasn't one of the other brides named Honor recently?" "Yes, that was her cousin," Lovey countered. "Oh. Well, do ya, Ryan?" Ryan wasn't quite sure what he was agreeing to, but he nodded emphatically as if he'd followed everything perfectly. "I do." "Of course you do. You've never been a dumb one." Brother Anthony waved his hands wildly in the air. "Well, you're married. Kiss her so we can all watch." Patience turned to Ryan, laughter in her eyes. "You'd better make it good, since everyone is watching." Ryan shook his head at her. "Oh, I definitely plan on that." He caught her by the waist and pulled her to him, kissing her softly. As he kissed her, Patience felt something hit her around the waist. She turned and looked down at her new daughter, hugging both her and her father. Without missing a beat, they both leaned down and kissed one of Corinne's cheeks, making sure she was part of the ceremony. "And I promise to be the best mama I can possibly be to my sweet little Corinne," she added loudly for everyone gathered to hear. When she stood straight, she saw that all of the women in the church were patting their eyes suspiciously. All except for Felicity, who was just letting her tears fall where they would. Patience loved that about her sister. Her heart was huge, and she wasn't afraid to show whatever emotion was in it. Patience brushed her own tear away, and held Corinne's hand, who held Ryan's hand. Maybe she wasn't holding her new husband's hand directly, but it was close enough, because there was an unbroken chain through their sweet little girl. Ryan looked over at her. "Are we done?" Patience shook her head. "We have to go back to the Culpeppers for cake." "Cake? Who had time to bake a cake?" "Grace always keeps a few layers ready for emergency weddings. She decorated while the rest of us were getting ready for the wedding." He shrugged. "I guess we're going for cake then, aren't we?" She could see the disappointment on his face. "We can back out, but I don't really think that would be very kind of us." "No, we'll go. Corinne will want us there, at least for a little while." The three of them rode back to his house together in his truck, Corinne talking a mile a minute. "Did you see me dance down the aisle, Daddy? I thought we decided you were going to walk slowly and drop flowers while you walked, Corinne." Patience reminded her. "We did, but I just couldn't. The way I did it was easier, because I didn't have to drop any flowers. They just magically flew out of my basket." Patience laughed. "They did. But now you'll have to walk when Aunt Felicity gets married." "No, because Aunt Felicity already said I could dance down the aisle at her wedding. See, Mama, the way I did it is really smart. I get to dance down the aisle at 2 weddings, and not just one." Patience looked over at Ryan and saw that he was suppressing a laugh. "She takes after you, doesn't she?" He pulled into the driveway in front of Linda's house, before turning to her and raising an eyebrow. "Can you really picture me in a pink tutu?" Patience tried and dissolved into hysterical laughter. "I can, and it's not a pretty sight." Corinne scrambled out of her car seat. "Mama has a point, Daddy. You'd look pretty silly in a pink tutu." Patience laughed even harder at that, waiting as Ryan came around and opened her door and let Corinne out. Corinne ran right for the house, leaving her parents there looking at each other. "We won't stay long," Patience promised. "I need to get my clothes anyway." "Did you tell your parents you were marrying?" he asked. She shook her head. "I texted my mom, but I'll call her tomorrow while Dad's at work. He won't be happy about it. From what I've heard about your father, he's rarely happy about anything." "That's probably true." She put one hand on his shoulder and smiled. "Our wedding kiss got interrupted." "It did. Does that mean you want to try again?" "I'd like that a lot." She was still sitting in the truck, so they were closer to eye level than they'd been before, and she leaned forward the short distance it took to meet him halfway. Ryan put his hands on her waist and pressed his lips to hers, opening his mouth slightly. At her gasp of surprise, he swept his tongue into her mouth, touching the inside of her top lip with his tongue. Patience had heard of people who kissed that way, but it didn't seem like something she would ever be part of. When he deepened the kiss, she liked it, moving closer to him, pressing against his chest. After a moment, Ryan lifted his head, his breath coming much deeper than before. "Let's get this part of the day over with, so we can get on to the good part." "The good part?" He nodded. "The wedding night. I assure you. You'll think it's the good part too." She smiled, stroking his cheek with her hand, and feeling the faint stubble that had grown there since he'd shaved before church that morning. "I'll take your word for it." "Oh, you don't have to do that. I promise, I'll prove it to you."